call over to Ms. Joyce Rose. Ma'am, you may begin.
Thank you. And to begin with, I would like to apologize to everyone. We've had a couple of technical difficulties. As you know, we are distributed around the country, so we are relying on technology, and sometimes it doesn't exactly work the way we want it, as you all know. So anyway, welcome to Webinar 5 of the Back to Basics series, brought to you on behalf of the Health and Human Services Administration for Children and Families, Children's Bureau, and is presented by ICF International. I am Joyce Rose, your host and moderator for today's webinar, and joining me in a few minutes for a discussion on the impact of development methodologies, software frameworks, and platform choices on release management will be a distinguished panel of state participants. Slide. Changes. Next slide, please. Changes in funding availability and priority mean that opportunities for in-person discussions and networking among professionals working on state child welfare IT systems will be limited this year and likely in future years. Through this webinar series, the Division of State Systems within the Children's Bureau is offering a venue for information sharing and discussion. We are offering 6 webinars, 1 per month, between April and September. The webinars are intended not just for child welfare IT systems managers, but also all the staff involved getting and keeping child welfare systems up and running. Although our series theme is Back to Basics, we invite and encourage participation from both experienced and newer managers and staff, recognizing that even the most experienced among us have something new to learn or may need a refresher. All of the webinars are recorded and are available online as reference and informational resources for you and your staff. A global notification will be distributed once they are posted and accessible. Next. As I mentioned previously, today's 5th webinar in the Back to Basics series is the impact of development methodologies, software frameworks, and platform choices on release management. Please note the topic for the last webinar, number 6, in the Back to Basics series has been selected and will focus upon the end-user roles and communications. Next. Attendees are encouraged to participate in our webinar with questions and comments. All of our participant lines are muted now, but we will open them at the end of the presentation for discussion. You also can submit questions through the GoToWebinar chat feature, though we will also save those questions until after the presentation. Should we run out of time, we will respond to your questions via email, and/or should you have additional questions, you may submit those to me at the email address listed on the slide, joyce@kassets.com. Next. Because of our late start, we are going to skip the attendee poll so that we can get right to the heart of the webinar topic. Next. The format of today's webinar is an introduction of our state participants, followed by approximately 60 minutes of presentation. Then we will invite all attendees to participate in a Q&A session with our presenters, ending with a short wrap-up. Next. Our guest participants are Tom Kine, Fred Crawley, Tom Hammonds, Irochibuchi Arum, and myself as moderator. Tom Kine has been employed in the technology industry since 1975. For many of those years, he actually stayed awake, so was able to make a few cogent observations based on his many years of experience and wakefulness. He has been associated with SSIS Minnesota's SACWIS efforts since 1993. He is currently the SSIS Application and Development Supervisor and will be assuming Beth Holmgren's duties as Minnesota's SACWIS Manager upon her retirement in September. And Beth, if you are attending, we wish you only the very best. Fred Crawley has been the Functional State Development Manager on Ohio SACWIS since its inception in 2004 and lived to tell about it. Prior to that, he was instrumental in developing Ohio's FASES system to ensure Ohio met APCAR's and NCAN's federal reporting requirements. In his early days, Fred has fond memories of driving throughout the hills and valleys of Ohio's landscape, visiting many child welfare staff and listening to impassioned lectures on the importance of technology in supporting child welfare staff and improving services to vulnerable youth. Tom Hammonds is a director at CGI who is currently the Ohio SACLIS vendor. Tom is a certified PMP and has an MBA as well as a bachelor's degree in economics. He has worked on multiple Ohio systems within the health department. Tom is gifted in bringing diverse people together for a common cause. And lastly, Iwabuchi Arum has worked on Ohio SACLIS since the planning phase in 2004. He is the Business Application and Testing Manager at the Office of Families and Children. Arum has 3 different master's degrees and speaks several languages. Originally from Nigeria, he is skilled in project management, software development, and testing. We are so very pleased to have these experienced and qualified individuals as our guest participants. And myself, formerly the project director for the Wisconsin SACLIS, having retired in 2004. Since that time, I've been involved with several ACF Children's Bureau-sponsored training events. And now I hand the podium to Tom Kine. Tom?
Thanks, Joyce. Could we have the next slide? Thanks, Renee. So I want to start out by saying I believe in truth in advertising. So so here's a little bit of that. And I actually think this is an interesting and exciting topic, which may give you some idea what you're in for here with me. In Minnesota, we've put a lot of time and effort into developing our release process and schedule, and we've had a lot of internal discussions about it. We worked through a lot of different kinds of options. So I was pretty happy when Joyce asked me to present on this. Could I have the next slide, Renee? So this is the presentation format that Joyce sent out as an outline, and I'll be following it closely. I'll give you some background on the state of Minnesota, talk about our development methodology, and in our case it's actually methodologies. The software framework that we use, our system platform, how all of that has informed and impacted our release management process, lessons learned, and I'll talk about what we would do if we had it all to do over again. And I would say as well, I'm staying at a fairly high level here, but if you want more technical details, you're free to contact me through Joyce if you're interested. Next slide. So the Minnesota SACLIS is a case management system for county social workers. We have functions for child protection, foster care, adoptions, children's mental health, other child welfare programs, adult maltreatment reporting, waiver claiming, and other adult services. There's a great deal of functionality in the Minnesota SACLIS system, and throughout its development we've kept the system as open as possible so that it can be adapted for basically any social services program. So it is, although it's obviously a child welfare system, it is used for adult services as well. And it's a highly flexible system with a great deal of county and user customization possible. Could I have the next slide, Renee? Minnesota state supervised and county administered. I believe Ohio is as well. That brings its own challenges, as I'm sure you're aware, and it has had an impact on our platform and our process throughout the history of the project. The Minnesota SACLIS, which is known as the Social Service Information System, or SSIS, is used by 80 individual counties, 7 additional counties who are organized into 2 regions and 2 Indian tribes. And the regional organization is set up so that they can share resources and make better use of their staff. And regionalization is a trend in Minnesota. We're continuing to add counties to regions, and we're seeing counties exploring regionalization. So that's a particular challenge to us, the way we're architected in Minnesota. And the system serves over 6,000 agency social workers, case aides, and DHS staff who use SSIS to track cases involving about 270,000 individuals annually. Could I have the next slide? SSIS started planning in 1995. At that time, there was no statewide social service system. It took years of negotiation with counties to get SSIS established, and the counties wanted to keep their data separate from each other. There wasn't a lot of trust between the counties or between the counties and the state. And actually, we started some work in 1993 before the SACWIS legislation was even passed to start the planning for a standardized statewide system. And originally, working with the counties, there was a lot of mistrust with the state. It's a much different atmosphere now, and we have a good partnership with the counties. But because of the atmosphere, as we started the system, it led to some fundamental architectural decisions that I'll talk about a little later in the presentation. Next slide. In Minnesota, we use basically three methodologies. We use waterfall, RAD, and Agile. We're pretty pragmatic here, and we can only, in the development area, we can only control some aspects of our world, I would say. So we're open to use whatever works in any given set of circumstances. And I think these methodologies, the way we use them, and I'll talk about them in a little more detail, are appropriate for the tasks that we use them for. So I think they all have their place in how we do software development at SSIS. Next slide. So with waterfall, we use that for fiscal-related development. And as you probably know, waterfall is good with well-defined and understood requirements. The fiscal-related development involves payments to vendors for services provided and or reimbursements to counties. Waterfall gives us a high degree of control for these kinds of financial systems. We do a lot of upfront work design-wise to make sure that we have everything correct, and it gives us the ability to create detailed testing plans based on the design documentation, and that can be done concurrent with development. Once the design is complete, development and testing can go on concurrently. The cons, of course, to waterfall is that it's rigid, hard to adjust for changes in requirements. But again, for financial type applications, I think it's appropriate. And even in a waterfall, the developers get involved early in order to have a good understanding of the whole picture and to help with technical design issues. And at the back end of a waterfall development effort, we do a formal code review that's a little different than a standard code review in that we compare the code to the specifications. And it gives us an opportunity to ensure that the code is actually meeting the spec and vice versa, that the specification is accurate according to the code. And I would say waterfall works well for what we use it for. Next slide, please. We use RAD, or Rapid Application Development, for social services related development. These would be the UI portion of our system, and I think the pros for RAD are it is good for development that focuses on user interaction. You can do fast iterations focused on incremental improvements. Testing can be a challenge with RAD. Similarly to the waterfall, development gets involved early in these kinds of efforts, or we try to. Generally, we focus first on getting a database structure in place and getting it fairly close to what we think it's going to look like before we start work on the UI. So we do try to get a decent database foundation in place early in and do some planning up front, but then we'll go into an iterative process to develop the UI over it. We've been successful with this methodology as well. And it can be a challenge for the designers to keep up with the documentation because it moves pretty quickly. And again, because of that, the testing can be a challenge. Next slide. And finally, we use Agile for managing bug fixes and minor enhancement requests. The pros to Agile are that it's flexible, particularly as compared to waterfall. We get quick turnaround through the iterations. We do QA throughout the process, so we wind up with fewer defects. With this kind of methodology, it can be hard to get or maintain documentation, and for us, it works really well for managing a large number of small tasks. So we use this basically for our product backlog, and we use Agile as the core for how we drive our entire release process. So this is really the driving methodology for how we do our releases. Next slide. This would be a gross oversimplification, which I'm known for. But SSIS is your classic N-tier application. On the desktop, we have a Win32 client that's written in Delphi. We are introducing some C# through a component that helps facilitate Win32 interaction with managed or .NET code. Then, of course, we have a middle tier that we connect to. It has some business rules, and it provides the database connectivity. We can also hang a SOAP server off of this and get some interfaces through SOAP, and then our back end is an Oracle database. Next slide, please. The way that deploys, though, because of our county administration and because of our history, is we actually deploy a copy of SSIS to each of the sponsoring agencies. So the 80 counties each have a server with SSIS on it. The 2 regions each have a server with SSIS, and the 2 Minnesota tribes have a server or servers with SSIS on them. So we look a lot like a piece of package software or a COTS product that's installed in each of the counties. There are a number of centralized connections that we use, for instance, to help unduplicate clients statewide and to consolidate data for state and federal reporting. But the system actually can run without connectivity. So it can run as a standalone system and can pick up the connections when needed if there are any outages, and that kind of gives us a unique advantage, I think, on some of the disaster recovery planning type functions. Next slide, please. This is an eye chart, I know, and I'm not going to try to go into it in any detail, but what this shows is on the right-hand side, our county connections. Down through the middle are all our state servers that we use for unduplicating clients and so on, and state reporting, and on the left-hand side are all our interfaces. So it's a complex architecture, and keep in mind that we have about 6,000 client machines out there in the field, all of which have a SSIS application installed on them. Next slide, please. So, as you can imagine, distributing software to 6,000 plus desktops is a really big deal. Historically, until we introduced Agile, we did about 3 releases every 2 years. It was complicated. And of those 3 releases, 1 or maybe 2 of them were major releases, and then there was a bug fix or several bug fixes in between. We use a custom-written application launcher when the user takes the option on their desktop to launch SSIS. The launcher runs. It checks the server for updates. If an update is found, the launcher patches or replaces the EXE and launches the SSIS worker application. The patch technology minimizes the impact of pulling down the entire EXE over the county networks. That introducing patching was a big improvement for us. It really helped with software distributions. Next slide, please. So as I've said, Agile project management has had a huge impact on release management in general. When we moved into Agile, we converted to a quarterly release cycle for bug fixes and minor enhancements. And we divorced new development from the release scheduling process. So in the past, the reason releases took so long was the release schedules were dependent on when new development was ready, which is relatively unpredictable. With the Agile and the focus on quarterly releases, we release every quarter and we introduce the new development at the appropriate place in the release cycle. So if new development isn't ready, when a quarterly release is ready to go, we go with the quarterly release and delay the new development. And again, as in the past, with the more unpredictable release cycle or the release cycles that were dependent on new development, the later they were, kind of the behinder we got. Bug fixes continued to be pushed into the release as it was delayed for new development. And the more bug fixes we pushed in, the later the release got. So it was really a vicious cycle. And when you get to the tail end of these releases, there was more and more work being pushed into them. And at the back end, we'd have to have negotiation about what would be in the final release. It was a really difficult process to control and extremely unpredictable. Next slide, please. So with Agile project management, to give you some background of how we approached it and introduced it into SSIS, in 2009, Tom Jones and I, who's the GUI development supervisor, attended an IT symposium here in Minnesota, and they had an Agile development track. So Tom and I followed that track through the symposium and started learning about Agile. Tom joined a self-study group for Scrum Master. We started educating project staff on what Agile was, and we developed a plan to implement Agile for bug reports. And for us, we were kind of cherry picking here when we chose to do it for bug reports and minor enhancement requests, because as in the development group, we had more control over the scheduling of those than we do over new development. So we're able to introduce it here because this is a part of the project that we could more easily control. It took quite a while to start using Agile, a lot of planning. So we attended the seminar in 2009 and 2011. We actually started using Agile. And now we're to the point where we've had three or four releases, maybe 5 in a row delivered on time. So we've been successful with it. It's been quite a process. So next slide, please. Again, I know this is an eye chart, but this is the kind of material that we prepared and presented to the project staff when we were introducing Agile. We spent a lot of time explaining what we were doing, why, the mechanics of how it would work. So what you're looking at here is a sample iteration and what tasks need to be completed throughout it by who needs to do it. So down the left-hand side, we have tasks for managers, functional analysts, systems analysts, developers, QA, and so on, showing what these groups of people would be doing when. Down towards the bottom, middle is the actual release cycle. So you can see Sprint 1, Sprint 2, Sprint 3 in there. So what we do is several weeks before we're going to branch to a new quarterly release, we spend time planning up front. So we've turned this around, where in the past we negotiated the work at the end of the release. Now we're negotiating up front for how much work we can do. We only plan the first couple of sprints. Neither Tom nor I felt that we knew enough or were smart enough to be able to anticipate what would happen by the time we got to the third sprint. So we do 2 4-week sprints and keep the third one open for any remediation that we have to do as a result of the first couple sprints, and it gives us a place that we can push more work in as we go. So assuming things are going okay, we fill up sprint 3 pretty quickly as well, and that's a 5-week sprint. After the 3 sprints, then we move into pilot candidate builds. We're focused at this point on getting a good build for the counties who are going to pilot our application. Typically in Minnesota, that would be 2 or 3 counties. And then we move into a 4-week pilot before the statewide release. Next slide, please. And again, I apologize for the eye chart here, but this is showing how new development fits into that cycle. So at the top and bottom in the greenish color, you can see our quarterly release with the 3 sprints. Through the middle, we're trying to show how new development works. And again, we use this for internal communication with the staff. But basically, new development follows its own branch, and we have some technology that helps facilitate that. We use Star Team for source control. It supports a floating branch, which really helps with this process. But new development follows its own path, its own QA, etc. It's getting code from the main line throughout to help make it easier to merge code at the end. And when it's finally ready, we schedule it up for the next quarterly release that it fits into sprint 1. And we want it in the first sprint so that we have time to do a full QA on it or regression test throughout the development life cycle. It takes a lot of QA databases to support this. We have 12 to 18 QA databases, I would say. And because of our scheduling, could I have the next slide, please, Renee? We'll have 3 releases that we're working on concurrently, which is what this slide shows. We have the current statewide release that we may be taking bug reports on, so we'll maintain that in QA. We have whatever release is in pilot, and then we'll already, by the time we're going into pilot, we've already branched into our next release. So we have to juggle quite a bit at the end of a release cycle. It's complicated, and it's taken us some time to ramp up, so we've had to move into this fairly slowly. It works well at this point, but it has been a process. Next slide, please. And this is planned versus actual release dates. And again, we're doing well as far as hitting our release dates, and I say that with some surprise, and I think everyone's been surprised by that. There wasn't initially an expectation that we would actually be able to hit release dates, but we've stuck to it, and we've stuck to the policy of delaying functionality if needed. So the date is going to take precedence over introducing new functionality, and that's been a shock to staff, including developers, who are trying to push changes in late in the development cycle. And we're just not having it. We are sticking to our guns as far as what we're scheduling when and when we're actually going to release. We're still educating our customers, particularly the state policy people, on the scheduling implications this has, because we do need lead times for new development for anything complex. Next slide, please. We keep metrics. We measure this every release, so we know story points completed by release, and we feed this back into a work planning process. If I could have the next slide, please. And what we do is we take the story points and we estimate how much of our time is spent on working on the problem reports and these quarterly releases versus new development, and we allocated the available time to the product owners. And again, we're pragmatic here, so we're considering our product owners to be the development supervisors. And a more classic kind of Agile, your product owner would actually be a business customer. But because of how we're doing this, we've changed that around a little bit. So we take the story points that we know we can do on average, we allocate them out to 3 different areas of the application, and we let the supervisors in those areas determine what they want to schedule into the release. And there's give and take among those people to negotiate how much work is done per release in the different areas of the application. And again, this has helped us plan up front for our releases. It's helped us get out ahead of things quite a bit more, so that when we're finally towards the end of a release cycle and in that last sprint, there really aren't any surprises. We do quarterly or we do weekly updates with everyone to keep track of where to inform everyone where we're at in the sprints, how well we're doing. Tom Jones does an excellent job with that. He runs we only do 2 stand-ups a week, but he manages those and keeps the developers on track. And we've really developed a pretty good process and a pretty good rhythm in here. Next slide, please. Could I have the next slide, Renee? Okay, as far as lessons learned go, I would say establishing fixed release dates and hitting them really builds credibility, and it takes a lot of pressure off. If your customers know that you're going to release every 3 months, it's not as difficult to delay things if you need more time to work on them than if you have unpredictable or ad hoc release dates, which is what we had. The fixed release dates really facilitate work planning. Everyone knows when we're going to release, and it's helped a lot, and you wouldn't necessarily think about this, but it's helped in, as we evaluate bug reports, we can schedule them into specific releases with a high degree of confidence when they're actually going to go out to the counties. Whereas in the past, when we tried to schedule bug fixes or minor enhancements, we'd push them into arbitrary releases in the future without really knowing what date they were going to be released. So now we've named our releases by quarter, so in 2014 we'll have our release 14.1, 14.2, 14.3, 14.4, and 15 we'll have 15.1, and so on. They're very predictable, they're easy to understand, and we can drop work into the appropriate buckets right up front. As I said, with credibility, the users are willing to negotiate schedule, and the project team really functions a lot more efficiently when you get a rhythm like this established. There's a distinct ebb and flow to things. People know what to expect, and I think it's really helped clean up a lot of processes. And our software quality really has gone up as well. With these predictable release dates, it's taken pressure off of everyone. I think there's been a noticeable improvement in quality, and we are reducing our backlog. And I have metrics to support some of the quality improvements as well. Next slide, please. If we had it to do all over again, I think we would establish a fixed release cycle as soon as possible. And we would focus on hitting the published release dates every time. Don't push last-minute fixes into the release. That really has, whenever we've done that, we've regretted it. It can make as many problems as it fixes. Negotiate scope at the front of each scheduled release. So at the front of that planning process, be clear about your work capacity, what you can do, be realistic about it, and people understand that if more work gets pushed into any given quarterly release, something has to be moved out. So it's a prioritization process. There are not unlimited resources from the development side, the QA side, the design side. And we've worked that out internally within the project staff, and now we're communicating that out to our customers more and giving them a view of our development process. And then finally, make it a priority to develop metrics measuring the quantity and quality of the work. And this helps sell these kinds of ideas, I think. If you have the metrics and can show that you are improving quality and are whittling down your backlog of work to be done, it really, again, helps with the credibility. It raises the comfort levels of everyone with an interest in the product. And our counties are big supporters of this as well, I would say, because for them now, they can plan on when they're going to get a release. So this release cycle not only has impacted the project staff and the policy people at the state, but the county workers as well. We planned this out carefully to not interfere with county financial cycles. We don't do it at a quarter end, at the year end and so on. And we publish our release dates a year in advance. And we have some idea of what's going into each release, so we communicate as much as possible, as often as possible. And I think that's been much appreciated. So that is the view from Minnesota, I guess, on release cycles and how our methodology and architecture has informed it, the view from 80,000 feet, I would say. Joyce, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you, Tom. And as expected, a very informative presentation. And I suspect our attendees will have some questions for you during the Q&A portion of the webinar. So now let's move on to the Ohio segment. And leading off will be IPT Arun. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Joyce. First off, I would like to commend you actually for attempting to say my full name. And you didn't do badly, actually. You did very well. Most people actually call me by my last name, since it's much easier to pronounce. First of all, I would like to very quickly thank ACF for giving Ohio another opportunity to participate in these webinar series. And it kind of speaks to the importance of the work that we all do. In line with what Tom did with Minnesota, we got to try the best we can, my colleagues and I, Tom, Fred, to stick with the schedule as prescribed. So looking at the timeline, we got to be looking at, I'm going to try to give a background of how Ohio operates when it comes to child welfare. And then we'd actually step through development methodology, and we'll go through the software framework and talk about the system platform as well. And then we'll talk about the impacts of release management. And then round up with lessons learned and a response to the question as to what we would do differently if we had it over again. Could you advance the slide, please? Ohio, as most people know, is like Minnesota, a county-administered state supervised state. We have over 88. We have 88 county public child welfare agencies that we work with. In addition to that, we also work with some private agencies. I think when we last on last count, we had about 94 of them, a little less than 100. Private agencies that we work with as well. The Ohio Software System is a web-based system. It has in excess of over 6 million lines of code, households. And so it's a very large, advanced system. We've been actually going at it now since 2004. And we rolled out our last public agency in 2008. Currently, we're working on an effort to be federally compliant, SACWIS-wise. We had our federal partners here earlier this year, and as a consequence of that visit, we have a laundry list of findings we are actively working to complete before they return early next year for another round of review. The way the Ohio project is set up, we have a mix of staff members that we work with. So we have an integrated project team that is made up of state development staff members as well as state policy members and also state software business staff members. And in addition to that, we obviously are very fortunate to work with some vendor staff members as well that represent the CGI organization. We have over 7,000 users of our system, and since we rolled out in Last County, which was in 2008, like I said, we have, as typical of systems like this, been able to implement a number of important improvements or enhancements of the system that was supposed to help our users get through their business processes. And I would like to mention a couple of them. We were able to successfully rework the financial module of the system, and we're also able to, from a reporting perspective, upgrade our Cognos system from 8.1 to 10.1. We also successfully overhauled the court processing module over the last several years. And we've actually realized that two of our mandated interfaces. We have the interface with our 4A system, CRISI, up and running at this point. And we also have our interface with the Medicaid system, MIPS, up and running as well. We also went through a very critical upgrade of our infrastructure, of the environments that we use to do development work, where we went from Oracle 9i to Oracle 11g over the last year as well, last 2 years, I think. And looking forward into the next year or maybe two years, we have a list of important project initiatives that we are actively working to accomplish. And one of those project initiatives is trying to complete phase 2 of our private agency rollout. Now, like I did reference, we have 94 private agencies that are currently using our system. But they're using our system very limitedly to perform functions that relate to training, training stipends and allowances, reimbursement. Phase 2 of the private agency initiative is going to enable private agencies to use our system to maintain or manage provider records in the system, complete home studies, and the like. We also have an initiative that we will be embarking upon that will bring on the 4E court systems that we have in Ohio to use Southways to manage their caseloads. Currently, we have about 24 county 4E courts that will be benefiting from that effort. Additionally, we're working on a mobile application that we call Field Assistant that would, once rolled out, enable county agency workers in the field to complete some basic functions while on home visits with clients. Things like activity logs and to access some intake and case record information as well from the field. That application is actually being tested now. So if all goes well, our hope is to have that out very soon so counties can start using the app while out in the field. Additionally, we're also working on an optimal J refactoring that would enable us to upgrade, because Optimal J currently isn't being supported. So it obviously brings about quite a bit of exposure in terms of risk. So if all goes well, that's another project initiative that we're looking to accomplish over the next fiscal year. I'm going to hand the discussion over to Tom to provide more detailed information about Optimal J as well. Thank you.
Great. You can advance the slide, please. Now, this is very similar to Tom Klein's slide. What we've tried to illustrate here is our development schedule. And we run each one of these things in parallel. So at the same time that we're doing our JADS, or our joint application development, in developing our screens, whatever it's going to be the enhancement, we have folks that are developing the code or working in the construction phase, executing test scripts, and then also doing business analysis and architectural review. Now, each one of those phases feeds into the next, and that allows us to keep a 4-week release schedule. So every 4 weeks, we're delivering a mixture of large, medium, and small enhancements to the system. You can advance it to the next slide. And what this chart tries to show you then is how those 4 weeks fit together. You can see on a day-by-day basis which days someone's conducting a JAD, doing development, doing the testing. And at the end of this presentation, what we've done is we've provided an illustration of what goes into each one of these steps, the inputs, the outputs, what's needed, and where the handoffs are, so that you might be able to use this information on your system. I'm just going to check and see if Fred Crawley's with us.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. And Fred, feel free to jump in here. You play a very integral part into this.
Sure, no problem. Next slide. All right, that's you, Tom.
Okay. The software framework platform, and what we try to illustrate here rather than show you all the different servers, is to show how the different tiers work together. The presentation tier, the business tier, and the database tier. As Irabuchi had described, we use a component called Optimal J to generate some of our code, and we're going to be refactoring that into using some of the newer and latest web technology. That's going to enable the Ohio TACWID system to expand on things such as the mobile field assistant and allow the application to use more of the newer technologies and meet the needs of our child welfare workers. And Fred, I'm going to pass it off to you with the release management on the next slide.
So next slide, please. One thing we wanted to say, we take a great deal of our success in our process and our productivity is that we've been in an integrated project team since approximately 1995. So a lot of the things that we're doing and we have been doing for a very long time that are now being known as Agile methods, we've been doing a lot of this stuff for a long time. One of the big things in Agile is that you have to involve your customers very tightly in your development work. And we actually, our business analysts and our folks in policy on the business side, we don't even really consider them to be our customers as we consider them to be our partners. So our team is broken down, our integrated project team is broken down into 5 distinct mini integrated project teams that are consistent with the major modules of the TACWID system. And those groups act as kind of autonomous little autonomons that basically look at the work that we have to do and do a lot of the planning and development. For example, all new work that's coming in, enhancement requests, defects, all of that stuff that's coming in on a weekly basis is looked at and put into the team queue. So each team has its own queue, and that queue is organized by the business analysts. That is to say, they put new work onto the queue, and they prioritize work in the queue. The developers involved will then work on looking at the impact of this new piece of work, determining when it can be done and which release. So they kind of together identify in which release each new piece of work is going to occur. So those queues, as it were, respond to or correspond to Scrum's backlog. And so that's how we look at it. So we've been doing a lot of things that are consistent with the Agile techniques well before Agile became prominent. So we do a lot of upfront planning. We introduce new functionality to our county workers on a regular basis, and that's part of our 4-week time box schedule. We have specific times in the schedule when we bring county workers in to let them look at the results of our JADs before we actually solidify things and start to really kind of hard code them. So the counties are built into that process. At the back end, we actually have counties come in to help us with testing. So that preliminary review of JADs or design and that back end testing involving the counties, we do that in every release. Once again, the release schedule milestones are checked on a regular basis. We have our BAs and our developers meeting every day, reviewing work. Even when development is going on, business analysts are logging into developer machines or visiting the developers at their desk, at their workstation, and making sure that the work is right, not after it's done, but while it's being done. Next slide. Well, once again, we think collaboration is key, and we can't really stress this above anything else. I don't know exactly how other counties are working, but to put your business analysts, your policy folks, your developers in a co-located situation is key to delivering quality software on a regular basis. We have a saying is we want to deliver often and frequently. I think I talked a little bit about the self-managed teams and how they meet every day on the work that's in process, but also things that are coming downstream. And one of the things that we're very proud of is up until we have the time we start developing, we have a lot of flexibility to change things in the queue, change the priority of work. Our testing is a combination, once again, of manual and automated testing. We're not doing as much automated testing as we would like, and we're improving that. But we have our business analysts, we have our developers, and we have our system testing team all working jointly in the testing process. Next slide. I think you guys want to hand this off to Ibuchi and Tom on this one.
Thank you, Fred. Reflecting on the question as to what we would do differently if we had it over again, one of the things that we talked about was trying to streamline the front end to ease the use of the system by caseworkers in the field. We did that. We did a lot of that relative to the intake area when we had to go kind of step through the functionalities that were implemented initially to streamline them in a way that allows them to make logical sense and to allow the flow to be very smooth for caseworkers in the field. Regarding the plan for incremental rollout of modules, because of the way we rolled out the Ohio Cycle system, when we first rolled out, we rolled out the entire application all at once. Hindsight being 2020, if we had it to do all over again, we probably would have effected some kind of change to that methodology in a way that will allow us to kind of segment the rollout of the application as opposed to rolling out the entire application all at once. The other thing that we talked about too was to find a way to maybe to have formalized the coordination of the dependencies between the different areas. We found out that when we went through our first initial round of JAGs and requirement definition process, because of the way we were set up in teams, there's a sense in which the work was kind of siloed in a way that compromised our ability to communicate across those different teams. So if we had it over again, we probably would have emphasized, maybe spent a little bit more time in trying to establish structures that would have allowed those kinds of cross-team communication to happen. So.
Great. And next slide, please. So these are slides that I mentioned that coincide with the other slide that depicted everything on a day-by-day basis. So it identifies the activity, the goal, the participants, tasks, inputs, and outputs. And we share those with you in hopes that they help. And if you ever have a better idea, please share it with us. We certainly have learned over the years that everyone's input is important and valued. And so if you can please advance the presentation then to approximately slide 46. And as they advance, you'll see each one of the steps here. And so one more, excellent. And we also provide you then some supporting information that may help you with your system. Some URLs on Agile, classic report findings, and other information that might find useful. One other thing I'd like to add is that we also do yearly planning. So we will forecast for a given year when we plan to do our releases, and then we break that down into the 4-week structures, so everyone can have a very good picture about what to expect, about what time of year. And even though that we work on the 4-week structure, we also try to be sympathetic and flexible in working with our end users, whether it be holidays or other times of the years that people are faced with different kinds of ups and downs, whether that be their workloads or vacation schedules and things like that. So we try to maintain the flexibility even though we have a very frequent release schedule. And with that, we'll go to the next slide and hand it back to Joyce.
Thank you to the Ohio gentleman. And Arun, I spent hours practicing your first name.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. So I found both the Minnesota and the Ohio presentations absolutely fascinating. And I think we all have to agree that, yes, this is rocket science. So let us now, next slide, please. It's time for attendee discussion. If we have any audience questions to our presenters, Elizabeth or Renee, may we please open the phone lines or chat to our webinar attendees?
Thank you. On the phone lines, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1.
Do we have any chat questions?
I'm reviewing them right now. I don't think so, but give me 1 second.
Okay.
No, we do not.
Okay, and nothing coming in via the phone?
At this time, there are no questions.
Okay.
Not sure how to take that.
One moment. We do have a question coming in on the phone line.
All right, here we go.
Mr. Kumar, you may ask your question.
This is regarding the field.
Mr. Kumar, you may ask your question.
This is regarding the field agent. What are the technologies being used for this mobile application?
Yeah, the field assistant is basically, it's not a mobile app in the sense that we are deploying something to the device or that we are storing anything on the device. It's actually a mobile website. The front end of that basically is jQuery mobile. We're using obviously HTML5 and CSS3, but the presentation layer is jQuery mobile. The rest of it is basically Java using Spring.
Thank you.
Sure.
At
this time, there are no further questions.
All right. Because we started late and we are going to end late, let us go to our wrap-up. Next slide, please. So today we have shared with you the insights of 2 states regarding their development methodologies, frameworks, and platforms, and how those choices have actually impacted their release management. So what's next? We will provide any follow-up regarding any questions. So if, because I cut the questions off early, if you have any, please don't hesitate to send those to me at Joyce at kassets.com. And then, of course, the last of the Back to Basics series webinar is next month. And then we will be starting the next set of 6 webinars in October. While the overall theme has not yet been determined, the focus of the next set will be on requirements and procurement. So again, this webinar has been recorded and will be made available online. When it is complete and posted, we will send a message via the SACWIS Managers listserv with the link. So I want to thank you, our attendees, for attending. And of course, I want to thank our state presenters. And I guess the next thing is I will see you in September. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. This concludes today's conference.